History and the mirror. History is like a mirror through which we see the reality of our past. But what if this mirror becomes cloudy? What if everything we were taught in books, everything we believe from generation to generation, turns out to be a lie? We all heard that Christopher Columbus discovered America, but what if the truth is different? We were taught that in stories of wars, the distinction between good and evil is always clear, but history is always written by the victors, and the truth often gets lost. Today, we will uncover some of the biggest lies written in history, the lies we were always taught to believe as truth. In history, perhaps no civilization has been as notorious as the Mongols. They were said to be bloodthirsty conquerors, gods of destruction, who burnt cities to the ground, killed millions of people, and created such fear that even today, their name sends shivers down the spine. But the question is, were the Mongols only destroyers, or did they contribute something good to the world? Let's take a look at the other side of the Mongols, a side that history didn't give much attention to. In the 13th century, Genghis Khan formed an army that ravaged China, Central Asia, Iran, Iraq, Russia, and even parts of Europe. Their attacks destroyed great cities like Baghdad, brought the downfall of the Abbasid Caliphate, and crushed countless civilizations beneath the hooves of their horses. It's said that wherever Genghis Khan's army went, no grass would grow. But is that the whole story? The biggest lie in history is that we view the Mongols only as barbarians, while in reality, their rule brought about many changes that we still see around us today. You may have heard of the Silk Road. It was a trade route that stretched from China to Europe, where the world's most precious goods, knowledge, and culture were exchanged. But do you know that it was the Mongols who secured and safeguarded this trade route? During their rule, trade flourished to such an extent that for the first time in Europe, Chinese silk, paper, and gunpowder arrived, laying the foundation for European progress. This period, known as the Pax Mongolica, Mongol peace, made travel safe, and a common man could journey across Asia without fear. The Mongols established a postal system, a network of messengers who could deliver messages across vast distances within hours, much like today's courier services. In a time when Europeans were fighting wars in the name of religion, the Mongols allowed people of all faiths to practice their religion freely. Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, and Jews could all maintain their places of worship. Genghis Khan introduced a legal system called the Yasa, which had strict punishments for corruption, protected the rights of women, and ensured equality and justice for all. The Mongols didn't just fight wars. Wherever they went, they brought intellectuals, scholars, and experts to work in their empire. They took knowledge from China, the printing press from Arabs, mathematics and medicine from India, and shared it with the world. So, were the Mongols only destroyers? Yes, they were conquerors. They destroyed cities, killed millions, and shook the world to its core. But if we only focus on that, we are only hearing half the story. If we view them as nothing more than bloodthirsty killers, it's the biggest lie in history. They were not only conquerors, but also the greatest reformers, changing trade, law, postal systems, and science in ways that still impact the world today. So, if anyone tells you that the Mongols came only to destroy, tell them that they also built a new world in the process. We all heard that Christopher Columbus was the first European to discover America in 1492. This is what we're taught in textbooks, children's stories, and even in schools. But what if I told you that this is the biggest deception in history? Columbus wasn't the first person, nor was he the true discoverer of America. Evidence shows that nearly 500 years before Columbus, Leif Erikson, the Viking king, and his Nordic companions had already reached North America in the 11th century. Ancient Viking settlements at L'Anse aux Meadows in Canada prove that Europeans had arrived in America long before Columbus. What's even more surprising is that Columbus never realized that he had reached a new continent. He always thought he had come to some islands near India. He himself was misled about his discovery, so how can we trust his findings? But what about the Native Americans who were already living on the land? For them, the land didn't need to be discovered by Columbus. It was their home long before him. It is said that Chinese Admiral Zheng, he and Muslim Arab sailors had already crossed the Atlantic before Columbus. So, why was the myth of Columbus' discovery created? It was politically motivated in Europe to justify the occupation of the New World. After Columbus' so-called discovery, millions of indigenous people were massacred, enslaved, and the entire continent was colonized by European powers. So, did Columbus really discover America? If discovery means that a European was the first to step foot on the land, then perhaps that's partially true. But if discovery means that the land was uninhabited until Columbus arrived, then that's a blatant lie. You've probably heard the story of the Greek army using a wooden horse to trick the Trojans into letting them into their city, only for them to destroy it from within. The story sounds fascinating, a brilliant military strategy. But is it true or is it just a myth? The war between the Greeks and the Trojans lasted 12 years, but the Greeks failed to breach the city's defenses. In the end, they built a cunning plan, a wooden horse, in which Greek soldiers hid. When the Trojans thought the Greeks had given up and left, they brought the horse into their city. At night, the Greek soldiers emerged and opened the gates, letting the rest of the army in to burn the city. But did this really happen? This story was first written by the Greek poet Homer in his famous book The Odyssey, which wasn't meant to be a historical account, but a piece of literature. Later, Roman poet Virgil expanded the story in his book The Aeneid. However, there's no real evidence to support this story. Archaeologists have found no remains of the city of Troy that would prove the horse story. Some believe it was just a clever myth created to highlight the importance of strategy and deception in war. Then, how did the city of Troy fall? Some historians believe that it may have been due to an earthquake, a natural disaster, or internal rebellion. So, what is the truth? If you believe in Hollywood movies and ancient legends, the wooden horse might seem real. But if you step into the world of history and evidence, this story is nothing more than a legend.